Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual Broadcasting Network. This is your host, George Lewis, for the Spiritual But Not Religious show. We got two really good guests tonight, and they're actually coming from, one is in Canada, and one is in England, in Great Britain, near London, I think. And through Skype and a couple other technologies, we're able to have them in, as though they were in the studio with us tonight. So we're really looking forward to it. I want to tell you a little bit about what's going on at Spiritual Broadcasting Network. Along with putting on the Spiritual But Not Religious TV show, we have two other shows going right now. We've got Brian Hill, who does The Upside of You. Brian is a world-renowned astrologer. He has clients all over the world, and he's just really excellent. It's a call-in show. You can call in. We'll give you a free mini reading, and that's on Thursday evenings from 9 until 10 o'clock. 7:30 to 8:30 on Thursdays. We have a great channeler, Leanne Moody, a girl of 1,000 faces. It's a little hard to put her in a box as to what she does, but I had a session with both of these folks, and they are the real deal. So you want to be sure and tune in for that. Our plan at Spiritual Broadcasting Network is to eventually be a 24/7 broadcast company. So we'll be adding new shows as we move along. We've got some in mind now, people we're already talking to, and we want to bring you first-class quality in the spiritual broadcasting realm. My guest next week, we got a really interesting show for next week. We've got Bridget von Bülow, and what Bridget is involved with is with the Tibetan movement, trying to get these Chinese to free Tibet up, and working with the Dalai Lama. So we're going to have Bridget, and she has one of her friends who is a monk that is a Tibetan monk that we'll have with us. Should be a really, really dynamite show. Tonight I've got Mike O'Hara and Elfreda Pretorius. They wrote a book called The Meadow, and the Meadow, it's like almost 500 pages. They just have got their soul in this book. It's a wonderful, wonderful read. I really recommend that if you like novels and you want a good love story, this love story spans centuries and lifetimes. It's a reincarnation thing, and the meadow really is a place that we meet up between lifetimes. It's really a good story, and they're interested. The book is interesting, but I'll tell you what, its authors, who I have on tonight, are equally interesting as the book is. So if we've got Mike and Elfreda.
Yes, we do.
Good evening, Elfreda.
Yeah.
Mike.
Oh.
Hey. Good evening.
Yes.
Good to have you on tonight. And everything seems to be working pretty good at this point, so we'll get the show rolling. It looks like you're coming through pretty good. It was quite a bit of hassle getting set up, wasn't it? Are you getting
a bit like pulling teeth?
It was like pulling teeth. You got that right. But we did it. That's the main thing, and we're really pleased that you're here. Let's start a little bit with let's talk about the two of you first. And Elfreda, why don't you give us a little background on who you are and like what you've done prior to this book, and then we'll get over and get a little bio from Mike. Are you able to hear me on your end?
Yes, I am. Sorry,
just
can I go ahead and speak?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if you're watching the video, don't do that because there's such a delay, it will get you confused. I don't even watch the video because of that reason. So, and if you just stay with the phone, we'll be in pretty good sync at that point. So, yeah, give us a little background on yourself.
Okay. Okay, so my background is communication and public relations. And so what I have done for most of my life is work in that particular field. And I also had a business in self-motivation.
Uh-huh.
And so I immigrated from South Africa to Canada in 1994 and with my family. And started writing in 2003, which is something people said I always said I had to do.
Right.
And the first book that I wrote is called Stop Struggling and Start Living, and that became the flagship, if you like, for everything that I have done in my life to date.
That was actually a
And it is
that was actually a bestseller, wasn't it, Elfreda? Yes.
Yes, it became a bestseller. Yes, it became a bestseller in November 2008
Uh-huh.
on the internet. I should just add.
Sure.
And so I met Mike really in a roundabout way through this book, through a friend, a mutual friend, who had read my book, and it just started off an incredible journey for me that I just have no words for. It's just been an amazing journey, and we wrote The Meadow together, and here we are today.
Well, from what I can see, I was absorbed in your stories. It's just really, it's kind of like out of a novel itself, So somebody had written it for you. Mike, how about you? What tell us a little bit about where your background is and how you got into writing.
Are you on to me now, George? I think I missed that.
Oh yeah, tell us about yourself, Mike. How you got involved and got into writing, and give us a little bio on you, a little background.
Okay, well, I started my career off in the print game.
Aha.
I was indentured into the newspaper industry on the manufacturing side, the shop floor side. I was a compositor, and my career really started off in the good old, what we call the hot metal days.
Right.
These were when machines were machines and they had character. And as soon as everything went electronic and computerized, the soul went out of the industry. And I decided to get out of it as well. But within that period, I had quite a good communication and friendship with a lot of the sub-editors in the paper. And I was quite intrigued with a lot of the things that they used to edit for the newspaper. And it all started when Neil Armstrong did his moon landing. And I decided to write a short piece for the newspaper. And I was encouraged by a few of the editors, you should be taking a career up in writing or journalism. So what happened was I got out of the newspaper business. I stayed in the print game because I understood printing. And I was pretty good on the sales side. I had to get, in those days, times were hard. I had to get a part-time job, really, selling insurance, would you believe, but I realized I could sell, so I thought to myself, if I can sell insurance, surely I can sell print, an industry that I really know. And within that period, in that time, as I progressed, I just kept on writing, submitting articles to newspapers, magazines, but I never actually tackled a novel. Within that period, in fact, from the day I was probably indentured and before, there was always this idea that sort of lingered in my head. Like you have a song that gets in your mind and you could spend a day or a week.
Right.
And that song never leaves.
Right.
Well, this story sort of hovered for years and years. In fact, it hovered for nearly 40 years, maybe it's over 40 years. And that never came out. It never came to fruition until I made this connection with Elfreda, as she just described to you. So really, that's the.
So that's the background, and you two wrote this book with her in Canada and you in Great Britain, without ever meeting face to face. Am I right with that? Elfreda, maybe you can give us the story of how you two came together. How did all this come about?
Okay, it's a story I love telling because it really is very unique.
Right.
Mike dropped me an email, and he said in the email, the gist of it was that he had the story in his head for 40 years, and my background is motivation.
Sure.
And so when I heard that he had a story in his head for 40 years, I said to him, "Are you kidding? I mean, if it's in your head for 40 years, it must be really important. Get it out on paper because you'll feel so much better once you do that." And so he said, "Well, I've never written a book." And I said, "Well, I have. And, if you want to, then I will give you a hand. I'll get you started and show you how to do that." Well, I we got started, and I just never left the project. From day one, I was so incredibly involved in the whole storyline. And people always say to me, "How did you start writing the book with Mike, with all the stuff that you've got going on in your own life?" And the truth of it is that, when he said, I would like you officially to co-author the book with me. My head said, "Are you insane, Elfreda? You haven't had the time to write other people's books for them." But my heart said yes, because I was already in love with the story.
Right.
And the story was so mesmerizing, and that's how we began. And so, literally, it happened across the ether, by
Absolutely.
discussions. We had discussions on Skype. We would, discuss the gist of a chapter, and then, we would, Mike would write the outline. It would go back to me, and it would go backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and until we were both happy with it. And then Mike would sit down and he would write the first draft. And then that draft was when he was, finally it would come to me, and then, I expanded on that. And, and an incredible thing happened. And, Mike always says, "Yeah, whatever," when I say that. But I picked up on his feelings and his emotions. And
Right.
So was able to expand the story into the format that you have it there in book form.
It's a fantastic. In the book, tell us where they can come to buy this. I know they can get it on Amazon and a couple other places online. Do you have a website that it's available?
Mike, you want to take that?
Yeah, we have a website which is dedicated to the book. It's the Meadow homepage.
Okay, and what's that?
Um,
What's the address to that? It's
your 3Ws. The Meadow Novel .wordpress.com.
great. So that's where you can go
And
to pick the book up for. It's well worth the trip, well worth the journey. What I'd like to do now, if you don't mind, is let's give us the premise of the story, if you would. Well, what are we really talking about here? Mike or Elfreda, whichever one would like to cover that, just jump right in.
Mike, you go.
Okay, well, we're human beings, so let's start first and foremost. This is about life,
Right.
life itself, and how you mold a story, which this book is fiction, don't forget,
Yes.
is around life. And because of the rich tapestry of experiences that Elfreda and I have shared, and the unusual circumstances behind it, that in itself was too good not to use as a backdrop to the book.
Right.
Fact is always better than fiction. So what we did, we decided to use some of the instances that of our experiences while in our relationship between each other in writing this book, and they included it into the story itself, and the story progressed from there. I might add that I added at the beginning that the idea had been in my head, for 40 odd years, but it wasn't long before we got into the story that we found that we were both being equally creative in this, and we
Right.
had our own ideas that we put together into the melting pot, and it really is very much a mutually written.
And
story.
there were some pretty neat events that really took place with you two also around your sun signs and so forth. You want to tell us a little bit about that, Elfreda?
Yeah. Mike and I are absolute direct opposites in the zodiac.
Uh-huh.
He was born on the 16th of November, and I was born on the 16th of May, and he was born 10 o'clock at night, and I was born 10 o'clock in the morning. And I don't think you get more opposites or directly opposites than that in the zodiac. And so, we only found that out later on, but it was precipitated by things that both him and I didn't understand.
Right.
Like we both figured out or found out as we were progressing through the story that we both write to music, which means there's constant music playing while we are writing. And then we found out that we were listening to the same music.
So it's amazing
And-
stuff.
Yeah, it was actually quite spooky when we found that out. And I remember one day I was talking to him on Skype, and that particular subject was raised, and I said to him, I write with music, and he said, so did I. And so I said, well, what do you write to? And he said, well, let me turn up the volume. So he turned the volume up, and there was Enigma.
Huh.
And I said, hang on, let me turn up my volume, and there was Enigma. So we were both writing to music, and there was all sorts of really strange things happening. Mike and I are, even though that we are opposites in the zodiac and completely opposite personalities, I might add, we have a lot in common. We're interested in the same things, and we have incredible common fields that we cover. That is actually represented in the book. We both have an intense interest in the nature of being and of life, and why are we here? And we wrote this book. It started off with a romantic idea that Mike had in his head of two people who fall in love in antiquity and then come through a number of lifetimes together. But what we did is we interspersed our story with real life events and fiction. So The Meadow is a really interesting combination of fact and fiction, very delicately woven into one another, and which I think makes a fabulous read.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the way you have weaved this together it's really phenomenal. It just flows. It's a really, really good story. Mike, how about talking to us about your two protagonists? Give us an idea who they are and how they come together initially, and just a little brief idea of who our protagonists are in this story.
Okay, well, without giving the game away too much.
Right, exactly.
The two protagonists are called Steve Valentine and Eva Norman. Eva Norman is, for whatever reason, a name that I had in my head since the beginning of this idea that came, years and years ago. And they are, how can I put it? They are the reincarnate souls of two people who were born before recorded history.
Right.
And for whatever reason, in the wisdom of the cosmos, if you like, these two people were put on Earth numerous times in which there were obvious lessons to learn. I'm keeping this very brief because I don't want to give too much away, obviously. But they reached the new world, and if you like, that is where the proverbial hits the fan.
The proverbial.
And the excitement starts.
So, what interests me about this, when I looked at what was going on between you two, in other words, with the birthdays being so opposite, your birth dates, and the times being, everything just is so coordinated here. Did you have some experiences of having been reincarnated together, or do you have any past lives that you recalled, Elfreda?
It's a good thing you're asking me first. Okay, so here's the honest answer to that.
Right.
I'll let Mike answer on his own.
Okay.
And because he has a different answer to me, which I completely respect. And I personally have a lot of experiences of past lives. I am a certified hypnotherapist. And amongst other things, and I've had a number of past life regressions, not done to myself, but when I was in a state of meditation, I flipped spontaneously back into some of those experiences, and it was always just enough for me to know a certain thing. Now, of course, when you begin to work with somebody who lives an ocean away that you really don't know from Adam,
right?
But you begin to create this incredible and wonderful story together. Of course, your mind, you wonder about how, what is the background, or what brings something like that on. I mean, if you just look at the situation objectively, you have to say to yourself, so what on earth stimulated this contact? When I saw Mike's email the first time, I get quite a bit of email on my website. What I normally do is I just delete stuff like that, but I didn't delete his email. And so to go back to the past life story, I have picked Mike up in past lives, so I know that there's a connection. So, but I have a different psychic orientation than Mike has, and to me, from my perspective, if I have to be really honest, writing this book was almost a karmic thing of finishing off maybe a long path together. Don't know if that, I can't prove that, and neither do I have any interest in proving it, but you asked me the question,
Sure.
So now I'm answering it. I think what is a lot more important is that what is at play here is that there are two individuals with a certain level of knowledge and experience, and if you putting the two together was the perfect combination to write this book. And our purpose in writing this book was to stimulate people's minds so that they would begin to think about their own lives and ask questions.
Right. And where the questions like the age-old ones that you talk about, why am I here? What's my purpose? Where do I come from? Those kind of things, right?
Well, yeah, and and also to ask questions like, is it possible that I can learn everything that I need to learn in a lifetime?
Right.
If you look around you at, some people, and I don't mean this in a judgmental way at all, but sometimes I look at people who are, quite, middle-aged and older, but who die bitter and twisted, and you got to say to yourself, that's it?
Yeah.
What do you learn in this life? This is all about consciousness and lifting our consciousness and asking questions about everything. Not just have I lived before or something like that, but certainly to ask questions about the world that we live in. And do we live in a place that necessarily promotes spiritual growth optimally or not?
And you know what, Elfreda, there are just lots of people who are on this same kind of path. Part of the problem, part of the reason that Spiritual Broadcasting Network exists is that we really don't have a voice. It's like a few people will come together, but it's not as though like the Catholic Church has a huge they have a big voice in this thing, but people who've had the kinds of experiences that you've had and that Mike's had have no voice. And so part of what we're wanting to do is bring that all together. I have the same kind of predilection that you do. I've had past lives that I've remembered and met, in this lifetime and really played the whole thing out. And for me, it surely is a karmic kind of thing. So I really relate to what you say there. Mike, you had a different experience, huh?
Yeah, I'm sorry to put a damper on this, George.
No damper. It's great.
As far as the awareness factor is concerned, then Elfreda is absolutely streets ahead of me. I don't have a clue. I'll be honest with you. I have no memories. I have no recollections whatsoever. Even everything I dream, I have a heck of a job trying to remember when I wake up. So from the book's point of view, everything that was written, obviously, it came from the heart.
Right.
Now, the subconscious is a different kettle of fish, and I can't speak for that because it's so deep. So whatever comes from me probably comes from, if not a different place, a different aspect. And I'll be honest, perfectly honest, I don't understand it. But that does not stop you from using your imagination and trying to write a book of fiction to the best of your ability.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I think maybe that even helps because you're talking about fiction, and a fiction writer really gets into the imagination part of it. So, Mike, what 40 years, what was your first inkling of this story? I mean, what was going on for you that you would even think about this kind of a story when you've not had this? Were you being exposed to some kind of spiritual people who were involved in this kind of spirituality, or how'd that come about for you?
Well, if I was, I wouldn't know. I wasn't aware of it. the only thing that comes to mind, thinking all those years back, was that I used to get, how can I put this, animated graphics. That's about the best way. I always remember watching a movie years ago with Michael Caine called The Last Valley, and I always remember the introduction. It started off with it was a movie about the 30 Years War, the 100 Years War. I can't remember which, in Germany.
Right.
And you got this graphic of a knight that transformed into a shield. I was mesmerized by it, and that's always stayed in my mind. The graphic side of it. Now, how these thoughts are implanted, oh God, I wish I could tell you. I don't know. But from that, I always had the idea that love transcends everything, and if it can be expressed between two human beings, then that would be the way forward for me. And I tried to mold a story around that, and it started to evolve until to a point where it went no further. When I was 16-year-old, I remember reading a book by who I thought at the time was a Tibetan monk called Lobsang Rampa. I found out afterwards he was an adopted Tibetan monk. But his book, I was quite taken by it, but it obviously registers in the subconscious. But obviously, as you know, at 16, 17-year-old, what do? You get on with your life. And those sort of things went on the back burner. I was too busy chasing girls and, going out with the guys. And it didn't really become serious, probably until I was in my early 30s. And it started to develop a bit further. But it never really got going until I started to discuss this with Elfreda.
Right.
And like you said, she said, you must be crazy to leave this in your head all the time. And,
well, yeah.
The rest is history.
Well, you mentioned Lobsang Rampa. Was that the Third Eye? Was that the name of the book? Because he did three or four.
No, that might have been one of his books, because there were many written.
Right.
The book that I read was called The Thoughts of Lobsang Rampa.
Yeah, he was one of my early teachers. His writings was, and I like
right.
you, had a big shift in consciousness in reading that book. It really opened me up.
Do you know the other book that influenced me? And I still consider it to be one of the best thrillers that was ever written, and that's Dracula, believe it or not.
Oh, absolutely.
Bram Stoker, that is a brilliant thriller. I don't class it as a horror story. I class it as a thriller, and I was influenced by that as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely a thriller, no question. It's held the test of time, truly. That
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Elfreda, tell us a bit about our antagonist in this story.
The antagonist?
Yes.
Well, Mike will tell you, Elfreda hates him.
Aha.
When you write a book like this, you become so deeply emotionally involved with the characters.
Right.
And when I was when the horror and the vile character of the antagonist really started emerging, incredible things started happening, and he undergoes all sorts of personality changes, but he seems to be getting progressively worse.
Right.
And when we got to the chapter, which is the last of the past lives, the story that we tell of, which is chapter 5 and 6, I remember saying to Mike one day, "Do you have any idea how much I hate this man?" And so, it's just to give you an idea of how involved you become with it. But the antagonist plays a very important role in the story, because we are trying to depict light and dark, right?
Yes.
And we only learn through contrast in this world, and that's the process through which the human being learns.
Right.
So, which means you can't know what happiness is if you don't know what sadness is. You can't know what's high if you don't know what's low. And so this character beautifully fulfills this role. And, at a certain point, his entire past opens up to him, and he becomes aware of who he had been. But the purpose of that is for the reader really to then take stock of their own lives and,
Right.
and look back at, do I have Because when you identify with somebody like that, it usually is because there's something of that person in you. Otherwise, you can't identify with them.
You can't connect at all without it. And,
Yeah.
and that's the part of us, Elfreda, that I find that we want to stuff down in the background somewhere and not take a look at it all. But without actually looking at our dark side, we kind of go around as half people. Half of
Yeah.
us is in denial. One of the things that your emotions with your characters it's really imbued in the story. It just brings it to a real full richness and makes it very, very believable. So let me take a second for anyone who has just tuned in. We've got Elfreda Pretorius and Mike O'Hare, and their book is The Meadow. It's a really epic novel love story that spans centuries and lifetimes, and it's truly well written. It's just a real great piece of work. I've already had friends who want the book, Mike and Elfreda. They're just kind of chopping at the bit to get it. How long did it actually take you to write, not the book itself, but your first draft?
Wow, Mike, I'd let you tell that story, how we broke
Great.
the mold. It's quite amazing.
Well, if there's any experienced and seasoned authors looking in, they're going to cringe.
Yeah, I'm
Believe
sure
me,
of
they're
that.
gonna cringe. Because to say this book was written spontaneously is an understatement. We wrote this book on the fly, literally on the fly.
Right.
And the first draft was literally probably just a few pages that I'd written as the first chapter, and Frida got it and said, we have to embellish this. We've got to expand upon it and bring everything out. And that first chapter probably was the precursor to the rest. The whole draft, when you say the draft, are you talking about the manuscript?
Yes.
Well, the manuscript took us to complete about 2.5 years.
Right.
3. Within that period, there was some serious editing going on.
Well, I'm sure there was.
We realized, the continuity aspect of it, as you probably know, George, if you've read the book, it is complex.
Yes, it is.
You've got to. I'm not saying you've got to have your thinking cap on and your concentration. People who tell me that they speed read The Meadow, I can't believe that they have taken in all the aspects of The Meadow.
They're not going to get the fullness of it. Yeah, no, they're not going to get the
really
fullness.
Yeah. And to be honest, The Meadow is all about interpretation. There are no two people the same. There are as many people, or there are as many ways to interpret The Meadow as there are people to read it.
Right.
We'll all get something different.
Everybody gets their own little slant, don't they?
They do,
Yeah.
and they can take something from that, and I call it us planting the seed of curiosity, nothing more. No imposition. We don't challenge religion in this book at all. We might challenge the people who are steeped in religion, but that's a different matter.
Right.
And that is only just to get them to think and just admit to themselves that there's another aspect to life that they've probably never considered. And we are all guilty of this. We have conditioning that we can't get away from. And I'm striving hard, and I know Elfreda's striving hard to, release us from those shackles. I think we're managing it slowly but surely. And people, I hope, will start to think and just think, yeah, there is more to life than what we know.
Yeah, if we limit ourselves to what we can see, hear, feel, and touch, we're going to miss so much more that's going on. When I think back of how you two came together and how exactly direct opposites you are, if you think about that happening just happenstance, just random, no connection to anything. I mean, the odds of that happening with the billions of people in the world and over time and the distance between you, it's really hard for me to believe that there isn't some some greater hand in this in some way or other. And like you say, that's up to interpretations what that hand might look like. Having written a book myself and gone through the editing process with an editor, I really I can. There must have been a good deal of stress in this process for you, Elfreda. How did that work out for you? I mean, to be able to work together for 4 years total and not kill each other is pretty powerful.
Well, yeah. I mean, the reason why Mike is still alive is that he lives an ocean apart from me.
Uh-huh.
So no, it is an enormously stressful situation to do that, and and it happens when you put two people together who are both creative.
Right.
And so when the creative juices begin to flow, it literally takes you to another level. And what is interesting about when you get to that level, it's almost like there's a level of intolerance present while that creativity is blossoming and opening up, and then you have to come to a point where both come together and look at it again. Now, the one thing I can honestly say, despite our being so incredibly opposite and different to one another, the one thing that Mike and I have never questioned about each other is integrity.
Right.
And that is we've had, I don't know if that shows up anywhere in our biography or in our history, but Mike and I wrote this entire book together without a contract between us.
Wow.
And that is just, that just is the amount of trust that exists between us. And even though we had big blow-ups along the line, and I seriously considered getting an assassin, hiring an assassin to take him out. I never did it. Uh-huh. But despite all of that, we always came together again, and because it was like the story, the book, the project was much bigger than either Mike or my egos, and I can honestly say that. The book always came out on top.
Isn't that really, we talk about the protagonist and the antagonist. In the end, isn't it the ego, that dark side of us that just like pops its ugly head up, that causes all the problems and keeps us from this higher spirituality that's our birthright, really?
That's the yin and the yang in it, isn't it,
yeah.
George?
Yeah.
But this is the learning curve that we're on. Life is all about polarities. And without the polarities, there is nothing for us to experience.
Exactly.
People say if we only had a perfect world. If we had a perfect world, we wouldn't be here as human beings. We're here to suffer the wrath, the irony. It's always the suffering that we gain the most learning. And that is what life is about. And that's why, in my opinion, I'm sure Elfreda's opinion, it takes more than one lifetime, to get through and progress.
Absolutely.
Spiritual progress, that's another area that I don't claim to have any experience or
really
knowledge. Yeah.
That's really interesting, Mike, because that's really interesting because this project, this book was your initial idea, and it's really a heavy-duty spiritual book. So to hear you say that you don't, that's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, if you ask me to define spirituality, I would have great difficulty.
Yes.
Because, again, it's down to interpretation.
Yes. I think everybody has trouble defining spirituality. You ask like you were saying earlier, it's so diverse, you'll get a different story from everybody.
That's right. And I know my faults, and I try to learn by them. I don't often succeed, but I become aware of them.
Right.
And that is a big factor. If we can gain this awareness, just to look back on our own lives, be aware of what we've done, that allows you to take on that responsibility for yourself. And if we all took on responsibility for ourselves, believe you me, this world would be a lot different. to what we're experiencing now.
Be totally
Well,
different.
If I can just,
Yeah, please.
If I can just jump in there, George, and just qualify what Mike is saying there. If he says he couldn't define spirituality, I think I couldn't define it either. But your observation, the book is deeply spiritual. The one thing that I know about Mike is that Mike is frightfully honest.
Right.
He says a thing as it is, and that to me is actually a very spiritual thing, is to be very, very honest about whatever is afoot or whatever you're dealing with in a particular point in time. So, if the whole thing about spirituality is, there's a big difference between religion and spirituality, hence the very interesting show that is, spiritual but not religious.
Yes.
But if we ask anybody if you ask a deeply religious person to define what they understand as religious, they will probably describe the dogma that is involved in their particular belief. But in our case, to be spiritual to me is to be open, to be able to flow, to let information in, to be able to adjust, to be non-judgmental, to be able to accept, to be able to move on, to be authentic, to investigate things authentically. Those are all things that makes you a spiritual person.
So that's quite a list of really easy things to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
And so spirituality doesn't mean you have to go sit high on a mountain and meditate 24/7. That doesn't make you spiritual. Spiritual means walk the talk.
As a matter of fact, I think we can't be truly spiritual until we bring that spirituality into our humanness. I couldn't agree with you more. You mentioned that Mike was frightfully honest. I'm convinced that the first stage, the first step into living a spiritual life is exactly that, to be able to be honest and to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And we live in a world that's not always easy for us. It's a hard job.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I noticed about, not noticed, it's pretty obvious in the book. There's a great deal of intrigue and love and spirituality and sex, all kind of wrapped up in one big ball.
Yeah, yummy.
Yeah, it's very yummy. I think there are a lot of people out there who will totally enjoy it. At this point, I've got some other questions I want to ask you. I want to take you in a little different direction, but before I do that, I want to just check in with both of you and see if there's some aspect of this that you would like to talk about, something I haven't touched on, from Mike and from Elfreda. Mike, is there an area here that you'd like me to get into that I haven't been able to touch on for you?
Mike?
Well, yeah. Touch is the word, because it's impossible to go into depth in this.
Oh, it is, yeah.
We've written on the subject of multiple lives. You'll probably notice, George, that we never ever mentioned the word reincarnation in the book.
Exactly.
Whether that was a conscious thing or not, I don't know. But I'm going to surprise you here. I'm not convinced about reincarnation the way we perceive it in general terms.
Right.
And the reason why I say that is because if you look and study the simple laws of physics, particularly quantum science now, the way it's coming forward, and the way it's proving that there are parallel dimensions to us, I believe, and this is my belief, my belief system, if you like, which is my reality, no one else's, I believe that we're leading multiple lives because we can only be in the here and now. Outside of three-dimensional aspects, there is no time nor space. There is only the here and now. So therefore, if there are multi-dimensions that are already being discovered, it's very likely that we're living lives spontaneously as we are, in other words, different aspects of ourselves. Now, for instance, when we dream, just one aspect, something comes through, it's all muddled, we have a difficulty interpreting it, but sometimes it could be that we're experiencing something that we're living parallel to the life that we're living now, and we class that as reincarnation.
Right.
And that's the road that I'm going down, and it's a matter for discussion maybe at a later time, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, I'm of a similar bent as you are, Mike, and there was an author. She's dead now. Jane Roberts, who wrote a series of books. She channeled an entity called Seth back in the late '70s, early '80s, and what she talked about. The book she wrote on her own that wasn't channeled through Seth was called Oversoul 7. And it really expressed exactly what Mike is talking about at this point. How about you, Elfreda? Is it something you wanted to get in there?
Yeah, I want to agree with Mike and his definition of the existence of multiple lives and how that actually manifests. But there's another really important thing for me that was a driving force for Mike and I when we wrote this book together, and that was, I am deeply under the impression of how important it is that every individual in this life takes responsibility for his own life, no matter what. And there's no way that you can get away from whatever is going on in your life. You still have to take responsibility for your life, and that was a central theme in the book.
Right.
Is to express that in all sorts of ways. Now, we chose to use the form of a story because the story was in Mike's head, and I have to tell you honestly that when we began to write the book. We didn't have a list of things that we wanted to educate the readers on. What literally happened is that there was this natural process of flow of information that just kept coming in and kept coming in. And, the way that our energies flowed together to create this book, to me, even today, is quite amazing. When I pick up a copy of The Meadow and I look at it, I sometimes go, wow, we write this?
Yeah,
I was very thrilled with it.
And somebody will give you a quote from your book, and you think, well, gee, was that actually in the book, huh? Because there's so much in here, it just covers a lot of ground. I've read some things on your blog that are, very interesting and could be topics all of their own. But I'd kind of like to just to expand on them a little bit. And I'm just going to throw this up for whoever would like to speak to it. What role does negative thinking play in all of this? You talk a bit on your blog about negative thinking.
Which blog is that, George?
I'm sorry?
Which blog are you talking about?
I think it was your WordPress blog, but if there isn't, we'll move away from that. And how about the ley line? You talked about those, the lines?
Yeah.
Well, I'll leave that one to Elfreda.
Okay. I guess it was Elfreda's work that I was looking at where I'd seen that.
Oh yeah, it must be because I have a little bee in my bonnet about negative thoughts and stuff like that.
Right.
So, but ley lines is a wonderful example again of how the book was written together. I can tell. Well, let me say this: Mike created each and every character that is in the book. Mike created. And for instance, when he came up with Natalie, this absolutely adorable little girl, I remember saying to him, "Who is this? I don't know who this is. We've got enough people in the book," and he just said, "She has a place and a role, and let it be." Now she eventually was significant in the unfolding of the ley lines. And Mike described ley lines to me. When because a ley line is an energy grid of Earth,
right?
But the way that he described it to me, I understood it had to do with people. But then afterwards, when we did the research about it, we found out a wonderful thing is that we actually got that definition spot on, because ley lines is the energy grid of the Earth. But what happens is that all these ancient buildings like pyramids, like Stonehenge, like Hengens, or menhirs or barrows and things, they all built on ley lines on every continent of the world these fantastic old buildings and old castles and cathedrals are constructed on ley lines. And so it turns out that the story is that on a ley line, if you enter a building that is built on a ley line, that is a place where the individual's consciousness interacts with the consciousness of Earth. And actually has the ability to lift the consciousness level of the individual. So I guess if we can get into the pyramids, into places that, where we can go and test that, then maybe we can go and figure that out. But, I mean, that ley lines is a beautiful example of, Mike's level of thinking and his creativity and how he introduced concepts into the book that make the book incredibly interesting. And then, of course, little Natalie and little Hugo discovered a fantastic thing, which I won't disclose, while they were on that spot on the lake.
Tell us the meadow. How does the word meadow come into play here in the book? What is the meadow? Mike, you want?
Well, originally the meadow came into it later on. I think the original title was based around the feathers, wasn't it, Elfreda?
Yeah.
Based around what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear
that. The feathers. Which
right,
is
exactly.
A theme that runs through the whole story. Everything is based behind these feathers. The meadow is a place of solace. I have a meadow behind my house, and I used to go there to write just to get inspiration. I would sit by the brook, and all sorts used to come to me. And I know Elfreda has had the same experience as well. And we decided that the meadow would be an ideal place where departed souls, if you like, would actually retreat to between lives. In other words, beyond the trapdoor of death, which is one of Elfreda's phrases,
right?
Rather than reaching beyond through into the astral plane, which some people refer to, we have this place, this middle place, where, if you like, folks with unfinished business tend to hover there, recharge the batteries, and decide, are they going to come back to Earth, reincarnated, to carry on the good work, or start it all again, or whatever. And we agreed that the meadow was an ideal place, and we couldn't think of a better title for it than the meadow.
I don't think you could have thought of a better either. And just that whole idea of a meadow, a place where you're going to get some rest, a little respite from all the stress and strain of these past lives, because you really take your characters through some very interesting lives, some interesting kinds of times. Once again, we're talking to Michael Hare and Elfreda Pretorius. We've got their book here is The Meadow, and you can buy it on Amazon. You can, I'm sorry, not Mike, but Tom is going to put the website, their website up on the chat room, and you can just take a look over there and pick up a copy of the book. I guarantee you it's really well worth your time. You've been really super guests tonight. We've got a couple, 3-4 minutes left here that if we've missed something that's kind of important here, I'd like to just give you one last shot of anything you'd like to bring in about the story, about the experience, or any recommendations for people who are, Elfreda, I know that you're consciously, and Mike is consciously working on this transformative kind of process. And there are a lot of people out there who are struggling with that in trying to get some kind of direction. Have you got any kind of insights or any suggestions for them?
Well, yeah, I think what I would like to say is that a key thing that is important for every human being is to understand that you are always your best teacher and your best guru. And, don't look to other people to inform you. Go and do your own investigations. And, what we've done in the meadow is we've used a fictional story to disclose some information. And, we're not saying what it is, and because we are not here to influence people one way or the other. We want people to make up their own minds. And, when you use a story, when you use fiction, and you intersperse that with reality, then really what it does is it opens up the possibility for the individual to actually access their own creativity by reading the story and saying, how does this fit with me?
Right.
Can this, does this work for me? Can I deal with this? What does this mean to me? And that, from my perspective, that's one of the most important things, is to stimulate the thought processes in people and say, don't ask other people for their opinion. You know everything that you need to know. You just have to know where to look. And sometimes if you read a book like The Meadow or any other book, it just stimulates your thought process sufficiently so that you can go on and do your own investigation. Because the truth around this is, if you don't have experience of what you're talking about, you don't own that knowledge.
That's for sure.
It's just words.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, you've done a great job in the book of I think bringing people to a place where they will question, and fiction is a great way to do it. We have an awful lot of books about these kinds of topics that are nonfiction, and like the story isn't there, and your story is so captivating that I'm sure you're going to have a real positive effect on everyone. Mike, what time is it there in where you're at?
Sorry, George, I missed that.
It was late as it is where you're at, I suspect. What time is it there?
Oh, it's coming up to 3 a.m.
So,
George, I mean, what time do you call this?
So
I didn't even know this time of day existed.
I understand that. I totally hear. I want to thank you for being willing to stay up so late, and you just done a fantastic job here. I totally have enjoyed the two of you. Elfreda, thank you so much, and we'll look forward maybe at some point in the future to have you back. Elfreda, I'd like to have you on with your first book. I think Tom will pursue that with you. We'll build a whole show around that. So, thank you very much, and you have a great night, and get some sleep there, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Yep.
Thank you so much, George.
Good night now. Well, another hour, quick, huh, Tom? It just goes by as fast. Their book is such a fascinating book, but I'll tell you the truth. I really wanted to bring out their story so that you could grasp some idea of what you're going to encounter in the Meadow. If you're into spirituality and you like a good love story, you'll certainly find it here. So Thursday night, come back, 8:30, Leanne Moody, The Girl of 1,000 Faces. It's call in. You can get a little reading. At 9 until 10, we have Brian Hill, The Upside of You, great astrologer. Be sure and join us. And in the meantime, don't forget to accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.